birthed the feminists in my sister. Seen so many losses in the house where the women were the bosses. Mothers giving birth to the birth. I'm living proof of the afterbirthing. Giving birth through my trauma. I switched it all around and I made it my armor. Has man made a bomb of the woman that it's gonna take more than a talk to sit down and disarm us. Took a note to put my work in the youth and my children. Equality is the foundation of the house I'm building. Equality is the foundation of the next generation of the children. Out of many people, one. Can't have one without the two. I guess that's the key to set the agenda free.
Thank you, Lucas Salmon, for this beautiful poem. Dear all, I really hope you're well behind your screens. I'm Kerenn Elkaïm, and I'm really welcoming and happy to welcome you today at this event called Positively Men. Wherever you are, I'm sure you remember, and I won't sing it, James Brown's song, It's a Man's World, but it's nothing without a woman. We would like the country to say that the country is also true, that in the fight that are important to us, we are nothing if we don't join with men. It's really important to us. And for the eradication of gender-based violence or inequality. While lots of feminist movements have tendency to exclude men, we believe we need to include them, because we only win these battles if we fight hand in hand all together. Changing mentalities, opinions, and education is a real challenge that UNESCO considers as a global priority. Therefore, we are joining today Women in Africa for the campaign Positively Men Engage for Positive Masculinities and Gender Equality that can bring a better life for women and for men. So if you want to have questions through our discussions, you can send them and we will try to answer them later on. We would like to hear now Jamila Seftaoui, who's UNESCO's Director for Gender Equality, and who will tell us a few words.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, gender equality is high on the agenda of UNESCO, as it is for the UN in general and for many national governments. It is a core and strategic priority of UNESCO that cuts across all our work in headquarters in Paris, as well as across all our field offices across continents. More than 25 years after Beijing, persistent gender inequalities still stand in the way of prosperity, justice, and overall advancement. And our aim is to understand their deep and systemic roots, deconstruct and dismantle them wherever they are. We are here today to address a specific facet of the broad agenda to promote gender equality: the role of men and boys as participants and as transforming agents in gender equality initiatives. Gender is certainly not synonymous with women, yet gender equality has long been treated as rather a women's issue. Of course, men are just as gendered as women. You are numerous to join us online today. I welcome you all warmly in the name of UNESCO. This session is organized with Women in Africa, an international platform dedicated to the economic empowerment and support of women in the African continent, while having an eye on men. Our campaign, Positively Men, has been launched last year with the aim to offer a new narrative, a positive one, which can inspire and mobilize men globally to understand that it is within their reach to take action in favor of gender equality. And as you will hear in this session from our two powerful discussants, positive men who question their masculinities and decide to have them positive, inclusive, and supportive of women, enjoy a better life for themselves too. The term masculinities refers to the socially constructed masculine identities, the definition of what it means to be a man. Masculinities encompass notions and ideals about how men should or are expected to behave in a given context, culture, setting. It is generally accepted that there is no single concept of masculinity, no single male identity, and male roles vary across cultures, which is why the plural term masculinities is used to describe the varied ways of being a man and different positions of power. It is our choice at UNESCO to speak about and motivate for positive masculinities, the ones which reject and replace hegemonic, toxic, and patriarchal masculinities. These kind of masculinities manifest themselves not only through gender-based violence. Patriarchal masculinities, for example, are the ones which underpin men's greater access to power and resources on a preferential basis to women, helped in this by a social system that favors men's authoritarian status, a gender privilege which subordinates women and maintains power inequalities between individuals, between men and women, but also among men. Because hegemonic, toxic, or patriarchal masculinities are constructed and affirmed by tradition, education, culture, values, social and media messages, beliefs, perceptions, and by institutions, policies, laws, politics. Because of this, it is crucial to challenge the man-made foundations on which they are rooted and offer an alternative narrative, alternative way of being, alternative masculinities, compatible with human rights and human dignity. So my main message to you today through this session is this one. Toxic, discriminatory, patriarchal, and hegemonic masculinities are not a destiny, not a fatality, not a nature, not a determination. They are behaviors, man-made behaviors, which can and should be redefined and changed. In a small publication, we gathered a selection of stories from positive men, examples which we hope will contribute to break the cycle of the perpetuation of gender stereotypes and discriminations, and lead to a provocative self-questioning to, hopefully, attitudinal change. This publication can be downloaded through UNESCO Databank and freely used. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, we launched the campaign Positively Men under the engaged and inspiring patronage of the co-chairs of the Group of Friends for Gender Equality in UNESCO. Their Excellencies Ambassador of Iceland and Ambassador of Oman, dear Ambassador Al-Hamami, dear Hamed, dear Ambassador Erlingsdottir Ramet, dear Onur, we are proud to have you as patrons for this approach and initiative. May your engagement extend to all the other representatives of our member states and their governments and institutions. May it inspire them to increase the positive involvement of men and boys in gender equality initiatives, be it in the media, in culture, in science, in education, or in communication. I also would like to extend my sincere appreciation of His Excellency, Mr. Elman Abdullayev, Ambassador of Azerbaijan, who is one of the two great advocates of gender equality and positive masculinities, to have agreed to close this debate. The other one being Dr. Irma Erlingsdottir, Director of the Gender Equality Studies and Training Program at the Growth Center in Iceland. I'm very pleased that we have started with Irma and her team a collaboration to produce a much needed syllabus for a massive open online course on masculinities in motion. Irma will tell you more about this exciting initiative, and we will invite you to know more about it once it is finished. I would like also to congratulate Mr. Lucas Salmon from Norway and Mr. Richard Siaw from Ghana on the important roles they are playing towards a gender equal world, and thank them warmly for accepting to be our positive men discussants today in this session. My sincere thanks go also to Ms. Kerenn Elkaïm, who is moderating our debate today. Last but not least, I am very pleased to open this session with Ms. Hafsat Abiola, the President of Women in Africa. Without further ado, I wish you and us all a stimulating discussion and give the floor to Hafsat Abiola. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamila. Hafsat Abiola, who's considered as a champion for world democracy and president of Women in Africa, we'd be happy to hear you now.
Thank you, Kerenn. It's such a pleasure to see Jamila, and I want to take a moment to share with everyone how inspiring it has been for us at Women in Africa to work with her. You know, when you think of an institution like UNESCO, it's so big. I've been to the office in Paris, or I don't know if you would use the word office. It's almost like a whole block. It's so massive. And but Women in Africa is deeply committed to advancing women entrepreneurs across the African continent. So we had written to UNESCO, not expecting really any response, but to tell them about our work. And within a week of sending the letter, we got a call from UNESCO asking that we should set up a meeting, a Zoom meeting, because it was during the pandemic. We set up the Zoom meeting, and there we met Jamila, and it was really, in a way, life-changing for our organization. Women in Africa believes, and if the founder of Women in Africa were with us today, Aude Doutoin, she would tell us that 8% of the Fortune 500 companies are run by women, which means 92% are run by men. Men control disproportionately the global access to finance, to wealth, to capital, to technology. They control the disproportionate number of decision-making positions. And so if we want equality, we need to be able to engage men. So even though our organization is called Women in Africa, from the very beginning, we've been working actively to engage and enroll men to work with us, to partner with us, to champion African women. And within that world, we have a program called the African Man of the Year Award, or AMOYA, which we give to distinguished men, leaders in their countries, in their companies, who are doing the most innovative things to champion African women. And but when we were talking to Jamila, she shared with us the work that UNESCO does in Congo, how they're able to get the man on the street sharing about how they are making changes in to pursue gender equality. So essentially, she shared with us the importance of democratizing the struggle for gender equality. And that was how the idea for this publication that Jamila mentioned was born. I just want to take a moment to say that I just wish that every institution in the world, all the powerful institutions in the world, would be peopled by people like Jamila, who are so committed to the cause of the institution that they're ready to work with any and everyone. And I'm sorry that she's not here to hear this, but she's really made it such a pleasure for us to pursue this work at Women in Africa with UNESCO. But I also want to take a moment to just look on the faces of Richard, of Lucas, and of His Excellency, Mr. Elman Abdullayev, and to say thank you. Thank you for being pioneers. Thank you for championing women. I still remember, Lucas, when you shared your poem, you said, "Equality is the foundation of the house that I am building." It is the foundation of the house that we must all build if humanity is to thrive. We look at what is happening in Ukraine. We look at what is happening in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in northern Mozambique. The conflict, people dying unnecessarily. And in the publication we share, we talk about so many bullying and all kinds of struggles that people are encountering in a world that requires people to be tough. And most people are tough, but no one is tough all the time. And we need a world that can be gentle also, and a world that can really value the nurturing and the caring that people now stereotype as what women bring, but it is what all men and women have the capability to bring and should be nurtured and supported and encouraged to bring forward. It makes for a better world. And I want to thank you for the leadership that you're showing in your communities to change the language. But today is not really about listening to me. It's really about listening to you. And I'm so looking forward to everything you have to say, and to looking forward to also working with you to see how we get more men and boys to work along the lines that you've put forward, but also women and girls who maybe have bought into this notion that the man is the provider, the man mustn't cry, the man must be strong, which is also a trap, not just for men, but it's a trap also for them, the women. We have to change all of us together. And I look forward to that adventure with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hafsat Abiola, for your beautiful words. And as you're saying, all around the world, men are waking up and realizing that they have also a role to play in this wish for improving today's and tomorrow's world. Among them, we'll be hearing Lucas Salmon in Norway and Richard Siaw in Ghana. I'll present them in a few words. Richard Siaw was born in 1992 in Accra, Ghana. He has been working as a writer, a blogger, and a speaker, interested by human rights and mental health awareness. He's the executive director of Voice of Inspiring Inclusive Change Equitability, a community where young men and women widen the horizon of the inner and social change, whether it concerns violence or respect. Lucas Salmon, that you heard in the beginning with his poem, has origins from Caribbean and British families. He's a social entrepreneur, and he's specialized in youth work and creative work. He's also a writer, a blogger, and a speaker. As music is his passion, he founded RICO, Respect Incorporated Creative Order, an artistic project to unite people and offer them a way of expression to contribute to social change. Hello and welcome to both of you. It's really a pleasure to having you with us today. Richard, I would like to, are you with us? We don't hear you.
Hello.
Great, thank you. Richard, since a very young age, you felt different than other boys, different than other men. What is expected from men in your culture, and how did you become yourself while being different?
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, and also for this question, and for the platform as well to speak on this. So my culture typically just expects men to be the providers, the protectors, and show very little emotion. My father, for example, the closest that he has said to "I love you" was "I like you." And this was shortly after he had punished me for, going for a meeting that I did not ask for permission. And that was the kind of experience that we have typically as Africans. My father struggled with I've never really even hugged my father before. I've never embraced him before. And this is a man that I truly love. And a lot of people see my father as the man that is the role model of whom a good father is. So this good father, who is absolutely amazing, especially in our African context, has never embraced me, has never said, "I love you." And pretty much all that he did was to provide for us. And that is what we understand as a caring father. And you're expected as an African to, in my society, for example, Ghana, to, you know, always be tough and always choose the path, especially in jobs, the masculine job to do. And I wasn't that kind of person, even growing up as a child. I wasn't into sports. I would rather be in the music room. I remember in high school, everybody is into sports. Even the girls loved to go for the physical education exercises. And a lot of people are saying that it is a man's thing. The girls are doing it, so why won't you do it? But I would rather want to go into the music room and get my book. And I love to write stories. I love to move outside my environment to, you know, places that I've never been, into environments that I've never been, to write down my experiences. So all of these things were pretty much seen as unwelcoming. And even as was mentioned earlier, girls also saw that as a weakness, and that is not even accepted. It is not something that I was hailed for. I was pretty much shunned for these things. But for me, how I was able to come out of this was because I realized who I was. I accepted the thing that the world calls my weaknesses as my strength, and I embraced it. And I started writing. I remember my sister called me one day and told me, Richard, I think you used to write amazing in high school. I think you should find a website. You should start writing. And that's how my journey to getting here began. I started writing everything that the society, I felt like was wrong in the society that people were not talking about. So I named my blog, the tagline for my website or blog at the time was The Unspoken of Africa. So I was looking for things that were quite dogmatic and very much related to the status quo, and questioning these things, questioning the reason why I should feel bad for wanting to cry, the reason why men are expected to be this person, you know, the reason why I just can't be me and love to write and not sports. So that was truly the beginning of the change, writing these articles and making videos alongside it, doing podcasts for people to listen to and to expressing the things that I felt. And that I believe was the beginning of my emancipation, embracing who I am and loving the very things that people call my weakness as my strength. I believe that was the turning point.
Thank you. Lucas, you, on the contrary, you didn't grow up with men, and you were educated by your mother and your grandmother. Do you believe that you would have a different view on women and on the world if you had been educated by a man?
Well, that's a very deep question. I think in retrospect, I think being raised, you know, by my nan and my mum and my dad not being around. Also, you know, my mum got remarried and had a stepfather, so there was an element of a man around there, you know. And you know, like I don't want to start off tragic, but obviously within my background of being Caribbean, you know, that's kind of a hard kind of background as well, you know. Sometimes, or most of the time, dads are not usually around. So for me, it was kind of, you know, I had a lot of feminine energy around me from a very young age, you know? So it was like when I would go and play football at school and all the other boys were there with their dads and get tackled or kicked by the football, my mum and my nan would come on the football pitch and be like, stop, my grandson, Lucas, are you okay? And like, you know, all my other friends' dads, like when the boy got tackled or got hit, they'd be like, get up, son, come on, get back up, get in there. And sometimes it was like, you know, when my mum and nan would come in, it would be like, oh, I wouldn't cringe or nothing, but it would be like, we're not at home now, but they were very open. So I think for me, sometimes I did used to look at some of the other boys and think, wow, I wonder what it's like when your dad takes you fishing or this or that. It was kind of hard for me to deal with things, you know, when I had to deal with certain boisterous things, you know, like getting bullied or girls, there was women around. So it was kind of hard to go and express certain things to them. So I think in the sense of if there was a man around, I think and this is not to be stereotypical, maybe certain little things where I thought at that young age, or, you know, not being so into myself that I couldn't go and express them to my grandma or my nan. Not that they were bad things, because there were things that if there was a male energy around and dominance, I could have went and spoke about these things. And there was like my uncles, but they weren't like my peer group, they were a bit younger. So I think for me, my journey was more, I got a lot of love, a lot of attention, a lot of different insight. So then I would tend to more watch movies and watch films. Like you know, James Bond, I learned a lot like about the females from James Bond and other little things. So a lot of my heroes, or a lot of the people that I would see on TV, and also my peer group. But I'd say it would be different if I would have had a more father there around. I think more just basically for, as you know, hearing Richard talk about the love from his dad, for me, it was really, I didn't have a dad to cuddle. So I can kind of like relate to him. He's saying that his dad was around and it was, you know, the way he explained it. But for me, it was, I didn't have no dad there to hug. There was no one to give me that kind of hug. And I think when you're a young boy, yeah, I was around a lot of that woman energy, like I said, with the love and from my gran and from my mom, and they were very, you know, overcompensative of me not having that strong male dominant force around. But I think looking back in hindsight now, I think a boy can kind of raise himself in certain aspects, but I think if I would have probably had more of a man there, I think it would have took a lot of stress off my mum and my nan from trying to mold me as well. But I couldn't really say that because I haven't really had that experience. So I think if I was to have one, I hope it would just be positive, and hope that it would have been something that would have been, you know, an experience that I would have been able to incorporate with the beautiful and the lovely relationships that I have with my grandma and mum, basically.
Thank you, Richard. In what way do you believe that education is an essential tool for positive masculinity, and how should we include, when it's possible, of course, both parents in this education?
When you say education, you mean
We don't hear you. When you say education, what? Richard? Well, obviously we lost you a few moments, so I'll be back with Lucas, because there's another important tool that you are talking of, which is the tool of language. Why is it at the heart of your work, whether it's as a writer or in the language school that you have for displaced people, or in music?
I think language is a very important responsibility, and I think that with the work I've done with the music, when I've done projects with boys and girls who have come to do hip hop, because we specialize in hip hop music, for me, as I said, with my experience of my life and also the loss of my brother, the project's named after my brother Rico, who I tragically lost. He was murdered in London about 9 years ago. He was killed by a stray bullet after an altercation between two groups of boys outside a club in London. He had nothing to do with the situation, but he got hit by a stray bullet. So for me, I think when that happened for me, it made me want to get into the work and have an effect on a lot of these boys, because a lot of these boys would want to come into the studio and just make hip hop. And you know, most of the hip hop that you see is like gangsterism, and a lot of it talks a bit negative, or a lot negatively on women and stuff like that. So for me, it was making them aware of being responsible of their art, whether it be visual, whether it be verbal, and the power of words and language, and how that, you know, the way you express yourself and how you use language is almost like, you know, the way you present yourself, the way you wear your clothes, your body language. So I take it upon myself to, you know, make them aware of how words can build, and also that how words can destroy, and also how words can empower. So with my work, I like to incorporate with them and exercise what I do before they come into the studio. Obviously, a lot of the kids that join the RICO projects, they know about the loss of my brother. So I have that as a good base and foundation to stand on. The project, as you know, stands for Respect Incorporated Creative Order. So when they do come into the project, you know, they find out about my brother, they learn about, you know, why I'm doing it and the background of it. So I like to incorporate a way of that they're aware of what they're getting into. So I don't tolerate, you know, no gun talk, using the terms, excuse me, like the term in hip hop, I'll have to say words like bitch and hoe and this kind of stuff. So I will give them 2 pieces of paper, because a lot of the times you get a lot of these boys coming into the studio and they create a false self. Because a lot of the hip hop, you know, it's an image, you know, they want to do gangster or they want to seem tough. So before I even get them in the studio, I do an exercise with them, which I work with them with, and I give them 2 pieces of paper. And I say, on this piece of paper, I want you to write about one of the best experiences of your life, a great feeling, yeah, that you can remember, a good memory. And on this other piece of paper, I want you to write about, not necessarily a negative experience, but like about a bad memory or something that you've experienced. And we write these 2 pieces of paper and put them together, and then we weave and construct from there. So for me, I take language as a very serious thing, especially with the music. You know, a lot of the kids coming in and like, well, we're just gonna go in the studio and start rapping. So it gives me a good insight into seeing what they're like, what they want to do, and I can kind of gauge them. And later on down the line, when I do show them these 2 pieces of paper, like, you know, maybe after a year, I've had kids come back and they've looked at it. It's been like, you know, you can see the transition and the maturity in that. The language is a very powerful thing, especially in the music I do with hip hop. So I tend to like make them be very responsible and aware of the message that they project and what they're going to say and how they can empower people, you know, and how these words can be used to build people up. And especially for the females as well. I've had females come in and some of them, you know, they want to do like the Nicki Minaj, because a lot of the hip hop females, there's a lot of sexualization and a lot of other things. And I think that, you know, with the music and your creativity, you do have to give them the kind of, you know, path to kind of do their own thing, what they want to do. But I tend to try to harness them and try to give them just a different narrative, just so they can see 2 ends of the spectrum and then put that together and then they create their art.
You were speaking about violence, and we see that 80% of gun violence is committed or represented by men. As you said, your brother was sadly a victim of that. Through the music, how can you try to canalize this violence that we all have in us and that can be sometimes expressed through another way than purely violence? And how can we find inner peace through a project like yours to go to a broader peace with others, with women, and with society?
Well, as I've explained before, I think that a lot of the music, especially hip hop, a lot of the people that get into it create a full self. For one, it's entertainment. So this is entertainment. So it can be under the guise of, oh, I'm just pretending to be this way. But your message and your words will have a desired effect on people, whether that be women, whether that be a child, whether that be someone that isn't on a mature level for it. And a lot of this music does have a certain age that you can listen to it. But as you know, with YouTube and, you know, the expansion of the internet, things are at the touch of tips for little kids. Like my daughters use telephones and can go on YouTube. So I think that basically that the message that people can give and use through music is very powerful. And I think, like, I am a champion for hip hop, but I do think a lot of the times that a lot of these rappers, especially the ones that these kids look up to, should be held accountable for some of their art and how they go about the messages, you know, they display. For instance, you know, one of my favorite arguments is that, you know, there's a rapper called Jay-Z. I don't know if you've heard of Jay-Z. He's married to Beyonce. He's a billionaire. This guy is like, you know, Obama called him out for the campaign to help him. But even predate to date, he still used the word nigger in his lyrics. And I think this guy is a billionaire. You know, he's done many great things, but he still chooses to use this word. And I think when you reach a certain level, you know, and he's an intelligent guy, for him to still use this word, I think that he should be held accountable for that. And that should be looked upon, because you do have the voice to make that change. But also a young youth getting into the music, not necessarily famous, also going in to make hip hop or buy his first equipment. He also, with the use of the internet, with the use of YouTube and Facebook and these other platforms, can also have a voice. Everyone has a voice now, you know, the internet has given us all voices. So I think that the guidance that a lot of these youth get when they do go into a studio, because, you know, a lot of kids can just go in and hire a studio or buy a studio, or you can get your own equipment. It's relatively cheap. But with me, I'd like to be, I see myself as a pioneer, is that when someone comes into my project, that a lot of the youth and the girls and the boys that I work for, I try to kind of weave and incorporate something into them that they can go on and use. So if I was speaking an analogy for your question, is that we are all responsible for light, and the light that we pass on for others to shine that beacon of light that is handed on and passed on like a baton in a race should be very, very intricate and should be very taken care of and should be handed down almost as if it's something precious, like a child or something, you know, something very fragile, you know, and the way it's handed over and passed down, the message, you know, and how it is, that's a core, I think, value into the way that, you know, this music is projected, because it can change the world. It's global music. It's one of the biggest musics. Now, you watch an advert, there's hip hop music. You see a film, it's hip hop music. So hip hop does have the power to be a big gear in change. But, you know, a lot of it, like you said, is with the violence, capitalism. Not all is negative, because you have both. But I think that if you take it into a middle lane, that hip hop, which is poetry, which is spoken word, which is art, which comes into getting a job, which can come into politics. I mean, the spoken word of what I'm even doing now, the whole communication thing, it's a powerful thing. So I think it's not necessarily just with the music, because when you take away the music, you're left with the word, aren't you? So I think it comes down to us being accountable for our words, how we express ourselves, how we teach people this, and also from the top of the pyramid to the bottom of the pyramid, and the people that look up, you know, the kids that look up to the rappers and also the kids that want to get in. I think that there should be some accountability and some kind of, I don't know, call me a visionary. There should be some kind of license for this. There should be some kind of, you know, template that we work towards to keeping it positive.
Richard, happy to have you back. We were talking with you, started to talk with you about the importance of education as a tool of change in the relationships between men and women and in making this positive masculinity. How do you believe in the power of education?
Thank you very much for this question. I think in the curriculum of students or of schools, it should really be included when it comes to the dynamics between gender equality. Even the subject of gender equality is something that should be spoken about. Even the understanding of what gender is something that is quite non-existent. So there was a time where I brought together members of the voice community, the community that I run, and I asked them a very simple question, which you can still find on our YouTube channel. The question was, what is gender? And almost every one of them did not even know what gender is, because for a lot of times we focus on, I can say for my part of the world, which is Ghana, we focus on what sex is, and we use what sex is to define what gender is. And that was the feedback that I was getting from a lot of members in the voice community. And that was an opportunity for me to teach them what gender was. So gender in itself should be a subject on its own in education. Gender equality should be something that should be focused on. And the dynamics between students should also change. For example, if for a lot of times, things such as sports or the extracurricular activities such as sports are usually gendered. But if we are able to bridge that gap and allow people to see things based on your preference, based on your hobby, based on what you're good at, instead of gendering everything, there will be it will be a powerful tool of making that change. So I really do think that education, since most of us spend most of our time in school, it would be such a great tool using having gender as a subject, having gender equality as a subject, and making things less gendered in school and allow people to be themselves just because they are human and they deserve to express their passions.
With Lucas, we were talking about the importance of language, the importance of having a voice, but whether it's in Ghana, worldwide, we see that men mostly are silent when it's about talking about feelings or whether it's talking about abuse. Why do you try to break those taboos and to liberate painful wounds and violence through voice community?
Thank you very much. I had an awakening call I think for a long time being a blogger, even before starting this nonprofit Voice, I always took the approach fighting gender-based violence only from the women's perspective. But I did some research to find out that most perpetrators of gender-based violence are men. And most of these perpetrators have been abused themselves. They are victims that have faced some sort of gender-based violence themselves. So I think it will not be a complete work if we don't focus on the roots, if we don't focus on the cause of it. So the cause of it is that the cause of it being violence, and the cause of it being that men are victims of violence, yet are unable to express it. The cause of it being that men are also sexually abused and harassed, but are unable to free themselves coming out to speak up. The cause of it being that men are afraid to being themselves is a huge reason why women are also on the end facing these abuses that are perpetrated by men. So it was very important to me to create that platform to end the cycle. Creating platforms where men are able to talk about their situation, their violence, their experiences, and their struggles, created a spiral effect where one man will come out to say that this is what I have gone through, this is what I have experienced. It gave voice to other men to also come out to saying that same thing. And gradually we know that as we do this, we are solving the problem in itself from the root stage. We are solving the problem in itself from the people that are hugely causative agents of this problem in our society. So to me, tackling this from the perspective of men is indeed the end point or the goal of reaching to a place where women can also be free and liberated.
Lucas, why do you believe that it's so important to have this equality between men and women, not only for women, but that it can be positive for men too to live in such a world?
I think that it's good for, for both parties. And I think that as Richard was talking about with, men, like we don't really express ourselves deeply enough, and it's a stereotype that, oh, you're a man, you're meant to be this way, or you're a woman and you're meant to be this way. But as Richard was talking about the gender, I'm more talk about, like, I'm a bit deep, so I'd say like energy as well, which is the same thing. And it's trying to not necessarily merge these energies together or pit these energies against each other. It's just to let them flow naturally and in a positive way. And I think that it's important for us to be able to, just be who we are, and share experiences and share love, and, just be accountable for who we are, and, don't be afraid to express who you are. So I think that on that note, as Richard was saying, I think that there shouldn't really be a label on things. I think it should just be something where, we come together, we all come together, and we try to seek, like, not even a middle ground, just a fusion. That's it.
Now, the audience is also asking us some questions, and one of them to Richard is, how do we convince men who are not persuaded that this question of gender and stereotypes is so important for change?
I think we need to take, I call them 5 approaches to this. The very first approach is that men need to find relatable spaces. And for example, with the people that I handle in the voice community, they are mainly young people. So I remember the last month, we focused on the subject of consent. And we had invited resource persons to come and talk about sexual consent. And one resource person spoke, she told me that, oh, I'm coming with my PowerPoint presentation and I'm coming to talk to these people. I was like, no. Can we have a conversation? Can we have a relaxed environment with these young people to give in voice to these very things that we are going to talk about, just so we don't dump it on them, but to hear them as well. So we create an environment. We need to create an environment also for men. And we started by playing a game called Truth or Myth. And we selected we selected men, and we also selected women who reacted to certain statements that is quite popular out there about gender stereotypes. And they used their cards to show truth or myth, and then you show your card. And it was a fun exercise, but then after that exercise, the resource person came to say, well, I actually came here to come and talk to you about sexual consent and dump it on you. But hearing some of these things that you're saying, I've never even heard before. And I'm a man, and men were saying things that I absolutely have never heard before. So creating an environment that is relatable is absolutely important. And also another thing that we need to do is representation. Representation is everything. In religion, for example, my religion in Ghana, more than 70% of people are religious, mainly Christians. And religion tells us almost everything that we need to do in our society. So we have witch camps here in Ghana, where older women are camped on witchcraft accusations. They are isolated from their families. And most of these things are perpetrated by religious people, by leaders, male leaders. So to do this change, I find a lot of human rights organizations shunning or running away from religion, because we always think about religion as a retrogressive factor in our work. But really, if we include religion, if we representation being so important, we need to find people within those religious spaces to use religious language to reach out to these people, to making the change that is required. We need to also include all types of men. You know, sometimes I'm still talking about representation. We bring up men who are quite, we see these artsy men is quite expected of them. These are human rights centered men. Wow, that's quite expected of them. But when you bring that kind of different man that a lot of people think that is not stereotypically a positive masculine person, it begins to have a great impact on other men who are listening to people who are like them. And that is absolutely one of the things that makes the change. And I also really do think that engaging men like myself, like Lucas, like men all around the world is also a huge way of making that difference. It's almost like the fish and the cat scenario. Since men are hugely perpetrators of gender-based violence, why not make men the guardsmen of this situation, of this issue that is happening? Involve men, make them the guardsmen. Make sure that, like we do in the boys community, every human being in the boys community is expected to be a defense wherever they find themselves. Use your voice to speak up when you see injustice. So we are making men active in these spaces where they're using their voices to speak up. Now, I, as a man that is expected to be a perpetrator of gender-based violence, I am speaking up. How then do I become the perpetrator of the very thing that I'm asked to speak up on? So engaging men is a huge way of making it work. And of course, community. This goes back to my thoughts on a story that I had heard, where a policeman who wanted to make a difference in wherever he found himself. And he said to himself that I am going to stop corruption. I am going to fight corruption. And a case came in front of him where he said that you are going to jail, but the person offered to give him some money. This policeman said that I'm not taking that money, but he went to a superior and the superior took the money. So the man came back to him and said, you see, you've lost the case and all of that. So, but you lost the money as well. So I really do think that if we are able to involve community, change cannot happen just with one person. If we're able to involve the entire community in this work of change, we will definitely see what we expected to see in the end.
Thank you, Richard. And I'm sorry, time is running, so we won't be able to take all of your questions. But as you are pointing it very nicely, it's so important also to focus on the new generation in order to have that change for future times, for the times of the children and the grandchildren in this world. But of course, change started now with every drop, like you and Lucas Salmon are doing every day. Thank you really so much to both of you for this interview. Now, there is another man among us who's very keen on commitment and on those teams. His Excellency Elman Abdullayev, it's such an honor to have you with us. So thank you for being there today at this panel. You are the permanent delegate of the Republic of Azerbaijan to UNESCO. So we welcome you, and we would like to hear also a few words of you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kerenn Elkaïm, and I've been very carefully listening to our speakers. First of all, I would like to greet you all and thank you all for this brilliant initiative. And of course, I would like to start by thanking Jamila, a good friend of mine, Jamila, and of course, I would like to also commend her leadership. You know, she leads the department on the gender equality, and this is one of the global priorities of UNESCO, one of two major global priorities of UNESCO, which is, of course, an important indication how it is important to all of us. And of course, and as you know, we here in UNESCO do lots of interesting priorities, lots of interesting, amazing initiatives, especially on gender equality. And I would like to just name a few of them, like L'Oreal, UNESCO Women in Science International Award, UNESCO's Girls and Women Education Prize, Jazz Women in Africa, Creative Resilience Exhibition, Her Atlas, and many, of course, other initiatives which are really amazing. And of course, listening to our speakers, and of course your wonderful moderation, and this is really from one side, it's really inspiring, because I've been very careful listening, and I would like to just build my short remarks on what I've been listening to. And first of all, I see and I really join all of you that we have to join hand in hand on our call, a global call, that first of all, we need to equally contribute into this cause, equally contribute. This is really indeed very important. It has to be inclusive efforts. And listening to the figures that from Fortune, that only 8% of the global, the list of the CEO leaders, only 8% are female. Of course, it's really negative to me, because we have to join this hand in hand. And I think it also starts from the family, where we have to have this. We have to have develop those values in the family, without the distinguishing. And of course, listening to the story of Mr. Lucas Salmon, and the way he grew up, and as he says, feminine energy around him. It is, of course, important. It is a very strong contribution in the formation of the personality, his personality, and of course, I think this has to be also not only it shouldn't only come with the feminine energy. It also has to come from the masculine energy also, because we have to equally contribute to this call. And indeed, I've been also listening to the interesting parts, like creativity matters, diversity matters, passion. Well, listening to the conversation that you had with the two previous speakers, and with Mr. Richard Siaw, who brought another, of course, another experience from the other part of the world, where I had the honor to spend almost 10 years of my life in Africa. So indeed, and gender equality is another yet area where we have to focus more. But of course, speaking about the passion, passion has to include definitely the creativity, has to include the diversity. It has to include variety of the initiatives, and of course mainly the inspiring ones. And speaking on the ambience that we grew up, that matters a lot, because this is the fundamental one. I also would like to touch upon another issue, which is an overall recognition of the problem. Yes, there is a problem, and yes, there is a challenge. And first of all, I always when I appealed to my colleagues, and I always or younger friends or members of my family, I always say that the admitting a problem or admitting that there is a challenge is already a step forward. So we have to admit that there is an issue, and we have to contribute in general to this. It's a process, dear friends. It's a process that will take a while. And for example, I come from Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan is one of very creative societies in our part of the world. Our part of the world is a sort of an oriental world. It's on the line between Eastern Europe and Western Asia, where we have our own culture, our own traditions, but we grew up in the ambience where the women leadership always matter. We built the school for girls in 19th century. We have written operas where the women took part in the beginning of the 20th century. We're the country where we granted women right to vote in 1918. Not only to vote, also to not only to elect, also to be elected in 1919. So all this, of course, this is a process that takes a while. But in order to roll the process, we need an overall engagement regardless the sex, regardless the regardless the difference. And but how do we start this process? We start this process with the education. For example, one of the projects that we have had a great pleasure to sponsor or to support financially, that was implemented by UNESCO. It was these were the 4 important projects on the education of girls in Africa, and 4 countries where these projects worked very effectively. It was Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Liberia. We had different areas where we focused, but they focused mainly on the girls' education, and the whole idea was to find well, first of all, the whole philosophy behind those projects were that no one is left behind. This was the whole philosophy, and of course, looking into the role of the young girl or a role of a future woman or a mother. We saw what is the appropriate way or what is the right way to start, and then of course we remember the words by one of our major philanthropists in Azerbaijan, who built a school for the girls, and it was in 19th century, in the second half of the 19th century. He was asked by his surroundings that why he invested so much money in a girls' school. And when there were also boys around who also needed the education, and of course that was the 19th century. This is how that was the major dominating idea in the society. But what he said, it was very interesting about his investment into the school. Of course, he continued building those schools. He said, if I invest in a boy, I invest in one person. If I invest in a girl, I invest in a nation. So and this is what he said. And of course, looking into the projects in Africa, we very much focused on the education of the young girls that were initially deprived of the education. They were like 16, 18 years old. They already missed the opportunity of going to the primary school or secondary school. So we kind of went to the, with UNESCO, of course, we went to the different, especially the pastoralist society, where there were many uneducated girls in their in their 18s, 17s, 16s. So there was a kind of a programs of a shortcut programs where they could have a more comprehensive education, a fast education, so that they would join their classmates on the same level or on the same age. So this is pretty much as a very, very interesting approach towards the literacy. Of course, there is another idea that we've also implementing within our project was a health literacy, empowering girls, and in fact, in overall promoting the gender equality, the idea in overall societies, and of course, this was in line our major priorities. So, in fact, as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we have to think without discrimination every part of the world. We can't allow imbalance, disbalanced situation. We have to create the balance, and we have to invest into balance. Yes, we have Europe where the women are well educated. In our part of the world, in Azerbaijan, women are really well educated. In other Western countries, the women are educated, but there are parts of the world where they're still suffering, where they still are struggling. So we have to fix this balance. We have to fix this balance regardless where we are in the world, where we are located. It doesn't matter. And that's why when he said his name was Zainalabdin Tagiev. He himself, by the way, was not an educated man. He suffered from he had also the literacy issues. So because of this, he said that the major investment that he's going to do about is to improve the literacy around the world, and first of all in his own country. And this is what was his dream, to start by investing in total in family. So who would bring the family to the literacy level? Are the women. Women are bringing up the new members or new wave of the new generation. So that's why he thought that this is a fundamental investment into the education. And of course, at the core of gender equality, if we want to achieve that, and if we don't want to see 8% and we want to see 50% or at least 40%, we have to start with the education. This education is core. Everything has to start with the education. Education within the family, on the level of family, and of course education everywhere. And of course girls, small girls, young girls, they cannot be deprived of going to schools. They have to go to schools. They have to listen to the teachers. They have to read as much as possible. And then you will see how different they will be when they'll be 10, 12, or 13 years old. So this is just, briefly, I wanted to have my brief remarks about. And again, thank you so much for this brilliant initiative. And I think we have to have more of these initiatives, and listening to personal stories is quite important. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency. Thank you for this beautiful testimony and commitment of yours. We feel how passionate you are about it. And I also want to thank the audience who sent us beautiful messages through this panel. We would also like to hear, unfortunately, she's not there, then she'll have another voice, but Dr. Irma Erlingsdottir, who's a professor and director of Gender Equality Studies and Training Program in Iceland. We are joining now Dr. Giti Chandra, who's with us and who will be her voice today and reading her words. Hello and thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm just going to read out Irma's address. She can't be here. Ms. Jamila Seftaoui, Director of UNESCO's Division for Gender Equality, Ms. Hafsat Abiola, President of Women in Africa, Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues. It gives me great pleasure to be able to address you today at this very important webinar. As is evident from the discussions that have taken place this afternoon, engaging men and boys in combating gender stereotypes and toxic masculinities is key in moving towards a more gender equal world. On behalf of all of us at the Gender Equality Studies and Training Program, or GEST, at the University of Iceland, it is our pleasure to have the opportunity to share some exciting news with you at this webinar. But first, a little context. The GEST program at the University of Iceland promotes gender equality and social justice in low and middle income countries, as well as in conflict and post-conflict societies. And we do this through research, training, and education at the postgraduate level. Its main target group is professionals working for governments and civil society organizations. GEST is part of GROW, Center for Capacity Development, Sustainable Use of Natural Resources and Societal Change. In late 2019, based on a mutual strong focus on capacity development, the Icelandic Foreign Minister and the Director General of UNESCO signed a new partnership agreement, meaning that GEST now operates under the auspices of UNESCO. And we at GEST are very excited about this partnership, not least because it has opened up such wonderful possibilities for new connections and collaborations. And thus, late last year, the GROW GEST program and the Division for Gender Equality at UNESCO decided to come together to produce a massive open online course titled Men, Boys, and Masculinities. In recent years, massive open online courses, or MOOCs as they're called, have forever changed the landscape of education. University courses from places such as MIT, Harvard, and Stanford are now available to anyone with an internet connection. While people from around the world enroll in MOOCs, research has shown that these courses are especially important to people from low and middle income countries and lower socioeconomic brackets, who are more likely than others to report benefiting from open online courses, many of which are free. Thus, we cannot afford to ignore the importance of this medium. While MOOCs are offered around the world on an array of different topics, there are very few that address notions of masculinity especially, and none that do so from a global perspective. The goal of this project that is now in the works is to develop and disseminate a MOOC that addresses and analyzes global challenges of masculinity as they manifest in a variety of fields and disciplines, with a focus on best practices and solutions that will be relevant to a broad range of global learners and policymakers. As we speak, an expert group of international masculinity scholars is being put together. Over the next months, they will convene, discuss, and produce what will be a 5-week course, the focus of which will include introducing learners to theories of masculinities, the media's role in shaping masculinities, the role of boys and men in promoting gender equality in educational settings, and how notions of toxic masculinity contribute to violent extremism, among many, many other ideas. Next year, the course will be recorded, edited, and optimized for an online platform, and we hope to be able to present you with this new resource in the early summer of 2023. By producing and disseminating this MOOC, GROWGEST and UNESCO intend to create an accessible knowledge resource that will guide different stakeholders to meaningfully include a positive masculinities perspective on studies, programs, and initiatives that promote gender equality in the areas of education, communication and information, science, and culture. We hope that you will help us spread the word about men, boys, and masculinities, and that you will encourage members of your organizations to make use of this resource. So once again, thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I have been part of the research and development of other MOOCs that on gender that guest has done, and we might direct some questions to Mr. Damiano Giampaoli, who is our UNESCO liaison on the project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor, and please thank Irma Erlingsdottir for us when you see her. I would like to say to all of you that if you want to go deeper on in this subject of positively men, of engage for positive masculinities and gender equalities, UNESCO and Women in Africa realize this little brochure that you can find on our UNESCO's website. And when you have all information, also beautiful portraits of Richard Saw, Lucas Salmon, and a lot of men around the world that are really battling already for all these important things. I would like also to point a sentence of Yvan Jablonka, who is a big French historian, who said that the 21st century has three challenges: the ecology, social injustice, and gender inequality. Therefore, we have all to work positively together to bring hope and change into this world. I also like very much these words of His Excellency about the importance of education, saying that if we invest in a boy, we invest in a person, and if we invest in a girl, we invest in a nation and even in the world. Maybe we can conclude with briefly with Hafsat Abiola, if you want to say a few words to us.
I just want to thank everyone for an outstanding job on this very important topic. And just to say that we're all aware that we needed more time because this is an ongoing conversation. I think, Dr. Gichi, that you should consider all of us on this conversation and the audience to be part of your beta test, the beta testing of your course, because we all very much want to be part of this program. And to say, Kerenn, and to His Excellency, Mr. Elman and Abdullayev, that by the time we're in a perfectly gender equal world, the education of a boy and a girl will be the education of a nation. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all. And I wish you the best in those difficult times, and the battle goes on with each and every one of us. Thank you, and take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Take care now.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.